What's going on, guys? I think it's about time you and I had a very frank and honest conversation about exactly what it takes to succeed in this game. Online poker is an immensely competitive hierarchy in which you have to stomp all over your peers. Poker's hard. You're not going to get better just by turning up and playing. Just because you have a good memory of a session you played last night, just because you ran good last week, doesn't mean you can just rock up and continue to win. If you don't put in the hours of studying, and if you don't take accountability for your own shortcomings and review your own mistakes and fix them, you're going to get nowhere. So yes, at times in this session I get animated, I get passionate, I give some really honest, brutal critique to Jess's game, but this is exactly how you should be as a coach in my opinion, because in poker it's just not going to cut it to have an approach like, okay, well, you know, maybe you should check, but if you feel like betting's okay, then who am I to say that it's not? You know, what you feel is completely worthy of validation and respect, and you shouldn't let anyone tell you that you have to check here if you feel like you should bet. But don't worry, guys. At the same time, I never lose my cool. I remain professional at all times in coaching. Why on earth would you bet here? It doesn't make any fucking sense. What are you doing here? What were you thinking? Why? So before we get into today's video, don't forget, we have this cool course called Cash Injection that's out on carrotcorner.com, and it's basically a hack. It's like a cheat code. You can fix up your win rate by watching 10 fairly short videos that teach you 10 devastatingly effective exploits against the pool. Hope you enjoy that, and I hope you enjoy today's coaching session with our hero, our protagonist, Jess. Let's get started. Alright guys, we are back. Jess, you're back in the hot seat today. We've got a bunch of your hands we have filtered for larger pots, so we're looking at between 30 and 400 BBs. Don't know if you played any pots that were 400 BBs this week.
No, not quite. I did get jammed on for 350 BBs over a 2x open and folded queens. That could have been, I think that would have been about a 500 BB pot.
Disciplined fold.
Folded. Yes. And then the rabbit hunt obviously comes down with a queen.
So what's the lesson here?
The lesson is not look at the rabbit hunt.
Yeah. The lesson is not call queens for 350 bigs, but don't press the rabbit hunt button.
Yeah.
No one likes D-negs dancing on the screen when they lose 2 stacks, and no one likes the rabbit hunt icon either. We just can't help it. We're addicts.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's been good. Running bad, I think. I have been running bad in 3-bet and 4-bet pots, like just missing flops every single time. I'm like, can I just please hit a flop?
Yeah, I feel like you notice a lot when you miss a flop, whereas I think with me, I'm so used to the no limit hold'em just being this miserable game where you have ace high over and over again. I think I've just accepted it as like part of my life now. Playing Oma has fun because you hit loads of flops, but then you have to fold anyway, so that's not really any better. It might be worse actually. If you play PLO, let us know in the comments whether that's an accurate depiction of your game. Anything else to say, Jess, about general poker stuff before we get started?
No, made a new withdrawal. Kind of not played tons. I've definitely not streamed. I need to get back streaming for sure. Just not really been in a good place for it. And the same with poker, I suppose. Not in a good place to just sit down and play. I've just been wanting to crash out and watch TV instead, watching Succession. I've got a new job though, which has kind of lifted my mood instantly. Things are looking up.
Nice. So hopefully when that starts and you're in a bit of a better place, you've got more energy, because your last job was like draining you a lot after work, right? You didn't really have the energy to really endure any of poker's horrors, having endured the horrors of your working day. But now, hopefully you'll have the willpower and the energy to do that, and you can get a bit more volume in. I would love to see you go on a mad obsessed burst of like studying loads, playing loads, learning lots and crushing. I'd love to see it. So I'll keep my fingers crossed that that's going to happen.
Definitely.
If you want any mental game coaching on, like, if you feel like you're struggling to put in volume or find the enthusiasm, we can do some mental game stuff on that as well. It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Could do a lesson on that before we wrap up for this series. We'll probably do a few more of these, and then we're going to bring on the student for season 3 of Coaching Journeys. If you are interested, guys, stay tuned. I will be asking you to apply. I'll give you the details on how to do that in the next few weeks, like Jess did back in, I don't know, February or whatever that was when you first came here. So we'll get you guys to do that as well. Anyway, on with the action. We have ace queen off here in the big blind, and we decide to 3-bet out of the big blind against hijack, and the flop comes queen 10-7. We go for a small bet here, which seems good. Villain raises. Okay, thoughts at this juncture then?
Thoughts here was like, I didn't really see that much urgency. Like, we've got top pair with like a decent backdoor flush draw. I think all that gets it in with us here. Not all of it, sorry, that's very thingy in words, but like quite a lot of it might be like sets and like, so you've got like sevens, tens, maybe a draws, but we've got the queen blocker, so not that many. So yeah, I think a call is better here. I think you could probably just jam.
Yeah, I agree with jam. I think theoretically, this is the pure jam, probably, or close to a pure jam. Maybe with the queen of diamonds, it plays a little bit more call, actually, but I don't think that'll be a massive deal. When we're at a low SPR like this, I think one thing just to accept is that the price of jamming and what we lose by jamming in relation to the pot isn't actually that much. There's one factor I'd like you to touch on a little bit more here in your thought process that you haven't mentioned yet. What would be another benefit to jamming here, other than just the fact that we might have enough equity to get it in for value? What else might be relevant here?
We could be called by draws like 8-9, Jack King, like that sort of stuff. Also,
yeah, so I think that's value, right? I think that's getting it in for value. So what else then? So if villain doesn't call it off, what happens? When villain folds there, why might that be good?
I've no idea. I thought we had quite a value heavy hand.
Okay, so how much equity do we have against ace jack?
I'd say probably about 60-70%.
More than that, but like not 100%. So same if villain has king jack, we have a lot of equity, but probably no more than about 67-68%. You know what to do, Stu Undergarments, specifically. Look this one up and let me know the equity we have against king jack in this exact spot. And anyone else that wants to do it, just Stu Undergarments tends to do that a lot and is always there with the equity. So shout out to you, my friend, and also anyone else who wants to look that up, let us know. But yeah, I think the denial of this is relevant as well, that when we shove and villain folds 30% or 25% or 20% equity, that's not a bad thing. You know, it's good to make villain fold 25% equity. This is not the river. We shouldn't be thinking in black and white terms of like, we're winning when they fold. It's like, yes, we're winning, but we're not like crushing. We're not like invincible. We don't have top set on queen deuce deuce. If we had queens on queen deuce deuce, we would never jam against the raise ever, because all of the fold equity is entirely useless, right? But the fold equity here, it does mean something. That's the only thing I would add. I think jam is probably the main line play here, but call is defensible as well. When I call here, it's not so much that I want to like fold heroically to a shove on like a blank turn or anything like that. That's why jam is okay, right? You're usually not going to be folding here unless you get a terrible run out anyway. And yeah, this sucks, the spot. If we actually range villain here properly, they probably have king jack, tens, sevens. Man, this is a really bad spot against humans. This is the kind of spot where the solver's going to be like, lol, call it off, because they're like finding enough bluffs. They have like jack 10 sometimes or something. But here's a question for you, Jez. In the cold waters of 25NL, in this aquarium, what are the bluffs here that Pool's going to show up with?
It's hard to think of them. Like, Pool doesn't show up with many bluffs. Kind of, I'm not going to say ever, because that's not one of those words, but like, they rarely do show up with bluffs. They're not that great at doing it. So shoves like this, there's another hand. Yeah, sorry, I won't go into that, but there's another hand that might pop up later where I made a fold, and now I'm thinking, not sure. But like here, yeah.
So I would posit to you that our hand has got worse on this card when we face jam. Like, I think the combination of this card coming and us facing a jam is a really bad thing. Because, well, what are they bluffing? King Jack just got there. Tens and sevens were already there. One combo of queens is possible. If they did raise the flop with something like ace king, I don't think you're going to see jam very often here unless they're like a fish or something, because it's just too thin to jam with king, queen, ace, king, ace, jack in this spot, right? Like, I don't think it's going to happen. So although it looks kind of absurd to fold ace, queen, I wonder if we're actually just getting pulverized here, and it looks like we should call from like an absolute hand strength perspective, but unless villain is like a fish or a whale or something, I actually think we're kind of dead here in this spot, sadly. I just don't think there are that many combos like Jack 9, 8, 9 calling 3-bets in these positions. I don't think there are that many hands bluffing us. I think we're going to run into 10s, 7s, or King Jack almost always, actually, I would be willing to say. I think this is a fold against these nits. I hate it. It's gross. The solver won't agree. I don't care. They're just not bluffing this spot. I just don't think so. Like, I'll actually be really surprised if we win here. I'll be really quite surprised. Okay, that's like the one hand, like literally the one combo, and it shouldn't even really get here pre-flop. So no. I wonder if this is a spot against Pool where you can just like heroically fold the turn on this particular card. Why
Possibly. Not? Yeah, I think I did hate the shove for all those reasons. The annoying thing about PT4 with GG is you can't actually see villain stats. It's hard to analyze if this player was like a green tag or a dark green or a beluga or something, and that's why I'm just calling it off. But like, I do remember this, like, damn it. It feels like I'm beat, but
but I can't fold because I have an irrational attachment to my absolute hand strength. Let's finish this sentence, Jess. Let's not shy away from this. I can't fold because I have an irrational emotional attachment to my absolute hand strength. If you find yourself calling for that reason, guys, you know what I would say. That's right. You should work on that. Don't worry, you'll get there. All right, so I think you can maybe just fold here, because I do think in reality you'll do very badly. If this is a reg, I would consider jamming the flop, because I think the denial, and I think you'll survive against other ace queens and the odd king queen and just some draws and stuff. I think you'll survive by jamming flop here. The problem is on the ace turn, I think with a reg, ace king and ace jack mostly just stop bluffing, obviously, because they've hit a pair now, so they check a lot, and king jack gets there. So what's actually left? Like exactly the king nine of diamonds that shouldn't have called pre? I'm not buying it. If it is, in the words of yourself, a beluga, and chat loves it, the audience, they love it when you say beluga, so keep saying beluga, you know, it really does it for them, then yeah, I think you just maybe call, and it's a crying call, but it's still not that happy. But against beluga, yeah, okay, let's call it off. Against a reg or like tight player, I think you just fold here, as grim as it is. It's just one of these spots where it's almost impossible for them to be bluffing, and you don't beat any value combos. Maybe queen 10 suited, right? That's like the one objection here that you could throw in, like maybe it's not a fold against the fish because they have more queen 10 suited, etc. But yeah, against a regular tight player, I really think you're kind of dead there. But yeah, whatever. Interesting spot. Jacks, get 3-bet, call. 9-8-7, check, check. Yeah, I think you can play this hand as a check. I think it would bet small really often here. If you think about it, this SPR, you can just use small bets, right? You don't have to rush pot growth. Deep, I might build a bigger bet into my strategy as well and actually play two sizes. That would facilitate the pot building with like jack 10, 9s, 8s, and 7s at a bit of a faster clip. So you could maybe bet bigger here as well. We check, we turn a straight, and we go for value bet now. Yeah, seems reasonable. Could again go a bit bigger if you want. And then we face the king of spades river. Thoughts?
I have some thoughts on this because this was playing against a person that I know. So this is someone else who hangs out in one of the discords. In this spot, I don't think I went for any sort of value on the river here. I don't think I bet river, purely because I think he's kind of the type of player that can definitely turn a hand into a bluff. And I don't think I'm strong enough to call a jam. I thought at the time, if I bet small here or whatever, and because we're deep as well, if I bet small here or whatever and he jams right over the top, then there's a massive, massive chance he could be bluffing, and I'm going to fold the better hand, I think. That was kind of my thought process here. I didn't want to get jammed on.
Yeah, I guess we could ask, like, well, what would they need to turn into a bluff in this spot to be bluffing? Something like ace 10 off with ace of spades, ace... What other ace X with a spade do they actually have here? Like, they don't call ace king with ace of spades on the turn. Aces with ace of spades? Just a random hand that called the turn, like two pair. I don't know. I don't think this is a spot where, even if someone's aggro, I still think this is a really difficult spot for people to want to jam on you a lot. I mean, you do have lots of flushes here yourself when you bet river, so even if it's an aggro player or someone who wants to get one over on you, unless they're just like really spewy and insane, I still think like the jam frequency in a spot like this will be rather low, like on 4 straight 3 flush. So I think you might be making a bit of a mountain out of that particular molehill there, a little bit. But I don't know. I can't speak for your dynamic though, so I don't know for sure. But put it this way, you can't have your cake of negativity and eat it. You can't say, I think they're bluffing a ton and I will fold to it, while also saying you're going to fold. Like, if they are actually capable of bluffing a ton, you should probably bet call the river. And if not, then you shouldn't feel as bad about bet folding it. I don't think you can have it both ways, where it's like, I'll get jammed on a ton and I'm going to fold. Like, if you're going to get jammed on a ton, that means they're over bluffing actually.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because they only have a few value combos, so you don't get to have it both ways. You have to be at least semi-positive about this. So the other side of value betting then is, what are we doing here equity-wise, and like, how do we think they'll react with worse hands here? Like, in terms of getting paid, what happens if we bet like half pot? What happens there? Like, what kind of hands could pay us off, do you think?
Like 2-pair hands, possibly like a set, although... Do they have sets on the turn? Yeah, maybe, actually, because it's still quite a dangerous board. Yeah, so sets, 2-pair hands, and then just kind of hands like Jack X, although we block them as well.
Well, Jack X is a chop, so I wouldn't really count that as a hand that pays you off. So to speak, it will call, but you will chop with it. So I wonder if maybe like 6s can be included here, some sets, and maybe like 2-pair, like 10-9, King 10, something like that sometimes. And then I guess like it's not impossible that you get like the, I don't know, the suspicious call from like aces with the ace of spades sometimes, or something like that. So overall, I think like we're losing to ace 8 of spades, ace 9 of spades, ace jack of spades. Maybe we might like get raised by that on the turn a lot. Ace queen of spades, I guess, could play this way. There are a few flush combos. There aren't like loads of them or anything. Yeah, like queen jack of spades, I think that's going to raise the turn like almost always. I guess the question just is, like, how often do we get paid off by those weaker hands? You could try a small bet. I don't hate it, but I do think it's kind of thin. And if you simultaneously think that your opponent is going to be tricky, is going to turn the right hands into bluffs on the river, and it's also not paying you off that often with something like a set here, then check back actually makes a lot of sense. It's quite player dependent. I would say against the fish, I'd just go for a small value bet here and then fold to the river raise, but against this opponent, I don't mind your check back actually.
Yeah, he is like a decent reg. Definitely could get tricky, and I was like, I'd rather just see showdown it.
Yeah, you have to be a bit careful with that kind of mode 2 thinking though. Like, you do want to quantify it and say, I do hate the branch where I get shoved on. It makes me feel really bad, but of course the goal isn't to avoid feeling terrible at all costs. The goal is actually to maximize EV and sort of deal with it when you feel bad. Be a bit careful there, but yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a horrible check back. Okay, on the button, we get 3-bet by button with King Jack. We call, we could also 4-bet. 5-4-3, check, check. So this is probably like a really overfolded node, Jess, like if you think about what they're doing here. I mean, you do have like a really miserable hand, but you do have quite a lot of flushes on this node as well, because don't forget that you have a range that's really rich in combos like 9s, 10s, jacks, queens, etc. in these positions. So my first instinct here is just that if you bet the turn relatively large here, it's going to be an overfolded spot. I don't even know if people are going to ever call you. Like, they have so many combos of like 9s through kings without a heart. That's just such a massive part of their range, and I think it's pure folding. Ace-X without a heart might not even call you all the time. I think this is a really overfolded spot. I smell blood in the water here. I kind of swarm to it like a shark. Yeah, I think this is a vulture spot.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I do sometimes kind of like not get scared, but like kind of the one tone. I can never remember the words for these.
Monotone?
Is it monotone? Yeah, this is what I mean. Yeah, so on monotone boards, like, I know that we can be vultures and take the pot down sometimes, but like, I think there's still something there that kind of stops me doing it, and I don't know why. I think I agree.
It's called revulsion theorem, and a lot of people feel this way, and that's why these spots are so underprotected. That's why people check back this flop so often with air and with hands that don't have a heart. They're disgusted, they're revolted, they don't want anything to do with it. And that's why their ranges are so weak here. They don't find the slow plays, they're not checking their flushes, they're not checking their overpair with a heart as often as they should be. Their range is a sitting duck for aggression. All we've got to do here is get over our own revulsion, and then we win this pot way more often than we're supposed to in theory. Half pot, third pot, B75. Probably don't like overbet here. It's silly. They have way more King of Hearts than you do. So I think you just go for something smallish here. But don't let your visual disgust stop you hand reading. Once you start hand reading here, you'll see this is a bet when you think about their actual range, right? It's more your visual sort of interpretation, like your subconscious just being like, this is a gross spot, you can't bluff. But like, how can you have a draw here and be bluffing? You can have like sixes maybe to have a straight draw. But like, other than that, you can't have a flush draw on a 4 flush board. So you do have to bluff some hands that just don't have a flush draw. And this hand blocks some folds, it blocks some calls. It blocks kings with a heart, it blocks kings without a heart, you know? But it blocks more kings with a heart than... No, it doesn't. That's nonsense. It blocks more kings without. But it doesn't matter. It's still going to be a decent bluff exploitatively. And I don't even care about the theoretical weeds here. I don't even want to get into them. I just think this is a super overfolded spot that you should be taking. And then on the river, you should just bomb. They just have so many folds here, so many auto pocket pair folds to a big bet. I like that you bluff river here. If you run into like ace queen or something, it'll probably look you up, but 9s with a heart, fine. At least you bluff river, that's really good. I'm really happy to see that you got over that kind of disgust by the river, but I would have just bet turn immediately, probably.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Okay, jacks, we get 3-bet, we call. 3-5-6, really good board for a range. I'd like to see a lot of third pot here. Basically just because our range is mostly overpair that's not nutted. So we have kind of thin value denial bets going on here, mostly when we bet. We have some sets too, but those don't have to rush to build pots. 7 turn. And we go for another bet here. Okay, cool. What's your thought process here?
I think here, like, we block a lot of the flush draws. So they probably do have, you know, something worth calling, like 8s, 9s, 10s, like some sort of pocket pair that we can get value from. They're also called, there are obviously flush draws as well to be called here. They are in the big blind though, so like definitely this kind of board is good for them. They've got more 4s than us. They've got, is this a 3-bet pot, sorry?
Yeah, 3-bet pot.
Yeah, all right, got you. So at this point, I just thought we can still get value from like 8s, not 8s. Yeah, 8s, 9s, 10s, that kind of stuff, and any flush draws that are about.
Okay, so why are we talking about 8s, 9s, and 10s and not queens, kings, and aces?
Yes. This
You're
is me
targeting
losing,
again.
This is me losing track of the hand. So they free bet and we call in position, isn't it? So yeah, they do obviously have better overpairs than us as well. They can have worse pocket pairs too that would still stick about, especially a hand like 8s or 9s.
Problem is, the 8s and 9s are flats most of the time in these positions. They're not 3-bets, whereas 10s plus are 3-bets much more often. So, like, in theory, 8s is close to a pure call pre-flop here in big blind. 9s is probably 75-25 in favour of call. Not saying that people won't 3-bet 9s, they will, but you're targeting, you're narrowing in on just the hands that you beat, even though those are much less likely than the hands that beat you. Their range here is more rich. It's richer in aces, kings, and queens than it is in 8s and 9s, because 8s and 9s don't really 3-bet often pre-flop, but queens plus 3-bet pure. Maybe queens plus raise flop sometimes, but not always, right? People get freaked out on this board and they definitely do check call. All of that said, this is a really scary spot where if they do have 8s and 9s, I agree that you get value from those hands because they are pair plus draw. But I think that jacks is actually a complete middling hand here. Like, maybe you can turn it into a bluff. Like, maybe if you just go bomb shove here, they fold a lot of overpairs. Like, that's possible. I think this is a phenomenal spot for your range, and it's a great spot to bluff in. But in terms of being able to value bet jacks, absolutely not. Because 1, 8s and 9s aren't that prevalent, and if they are, that's just not enough combos. 2, I don't think villain's really calling very many unmade hands here, like ace, king, ace, queen. I think these are, would you agree, that going in the muck like most of the time?
Yeah. Probably.
On the turn. So that doesn't leave us with very many hands that can call that we actually beat. So I think we're quite far from being able to value bet this hand for this amount of money. I think this is a polarization mistake. If you wanted to spin it as a bluff and you said, I'm going to blast the river because we're deep and I'm going to basically put them to the test and say, do you want to call me down with your overpairs? I've got all the sets, I've got all the straights, you don't. I actually love this. I'm actually psychotic enough to love turning jacks into a turn bluff and river jam here, but I think it's really far from a value bet, actually.
Right.
But you're targeting. You're focusing too much on 8s and 9s specifically. People do this. So, like, I'm going to bet the turn for value against 8s and 9s. It's like, very good, mate, but you don't just get to eliminate the rest of villain's range because you've chosen to put your own blinkers on. Poker doesn't work that way. But this is why I object so heavily to targeting, and it's why I make a big deal about it, you know, put it on the banned words list in the Discord group and all of that shit. I just hate it. I think it's a shit thought process. Yeah. Okay, so what you did wrong there was that you started with some really specific notion of blockers, right? The beginning of your thought process here was we block flush draws. I don't care. Like, neither of us understands what that means well enough to even, like, make a judgment on that without doing extensive analysis. That means multiple different things. Don't even want to get into it, but it should be very far from the start of your thought process. The start of your thought process needs to be, what's my equity against villain's range? What's villain's range? And what's my equity? And can I value bet? And then once you actually list the whole range, instead of just the parts you want to list, you'll see that you lack the equity to value bet. But you need to start with that. Whenever you're considering value betting, start with equity. It will really help, honestly.
Okay.
And I know it's a shift in thought process, but you have to make this shift if you want to become a winning player at this and higher stakes. You have to make that shift and start hand reading the full picture.
Yeah.
Don't start with really specific nitty-gritty factors like blockers. Don't start there. Okay. Get there in the future when you're playing against a top pro and you're a top pro years from now and you're playing 200 or 500. Maybe. 25-0. Do you value bet jacks in a turn? You need to talk about villain's whole range. You need to think about your equity. Yeah, and on the ace river, I would bluff. I think you've made a polarization mistake on the turn, but you can redeem it if you bomb this river.
All right.
Because what's villain's range here? Mostly.
Yeah, like queens, kings.
Queens, kings, tens. Like, you do beat 8s and 9s, but my gambit here would be, well, buddy, you don't have a 4 very often, and if you do, you might raise me on the turn. You don't really have 8-9 very often. You probably don't have any sets at all in these positions. I have all of the sets. I have 8-9. I have a 4, more than you do. And unless you have aces, you have a really bad hand now, and you're not going to call a pot size bet unless you have aces or a random 4. So I really think that a pot size bet here will yield you 85 to 90% fold equity, and you will win this pot with a hand that's showing down for about, I don't know, 25% equity, I would say you can show down for here. You can win. They can have 8s, they can have 9s, you can win. Yeah. But here's the thing, guys, and Jess, of course, you need to really think about this as well. If you're bluffing in a spot where you have showdown value, that could be okay if the fold equity is enormous. So it's actually okay to turn down showdown value and say, no, I'm not going to check, even though I know checking is good, because I think bluffing is even better. I think it's that overfolded. And I really think this is one of those spots.
Okay, yeah. I don't think about that at all. Like, definitely one of the biggest things I've learned from this whole thing is checking back when we have equity and not kind of turning hands into bluffs that have value. But I've not really thought about kind of in this spot, 100%, I'd have been like, we do beat 8s, 9s, 10s sometimes. Like, we've got some value here and check it back.
Yep. Which is totally normal. And you're right, that is a really high EV play. I just think if you pot it here, I just really feel like the fold equity is going to be enormous against pool. Like, absolutely huge. It's a really exploitative play, right? But I think it might be a good one.
I remember his hand as well. I think you're absolutely right.
Well, I'm not right, because I'm giving you the range. I'm pointing out a hand you forgot, but I'm still allowing your hands in the range. If he turned over 8s here, I wouldn't have liked it if you'd said that you were right and I was wrong. That I would have objected to that. So I'm also not going to accept that I was right. I'm just saying this is possible, so is 8s. But this sort of hand is overfolding dramatically on the river, so that's why we can bluff. So you're still making polarization errors by hyper-focusing on small parts of villain's range that you beat sometimes. And here, hey, I'm not going to critique you for checking back the river. 99 out of 100 regs would check back the river here. I'm not even critiquing it. I'm just trying to open your eyes to like where fold equity is huge.
Definitely.
Ace Jack, Jack 10, 9, small bet, under the gun against big blind, this is just, so we small bet flop, which is fine. They raise and we call. They continue betting on the turn. Yeah, I'd say this is already an interesting spot. Let's do some hand reading here. What's going on here in this spot?
Big blind against under the gun. So they have like 2 pair hands. They have like Jack 9, Jack 10, that kind of stuff. They have Queen X and King X that might be bluffing. They also have 9s. They have 10s as well, maybe calling from the big blind. So they've got like, I don't know, yeah, thinking about our equity then against 2 pairs sets and stuff like that. Like,
I'll just interject, right, because you're not done hand reading yet.
okay.
Keep listing value hands. You've mentioned 2 pairs and sets. What have you not mentioned?
Oh, 7, 8.
Much more important and much more abundant than 7, 8. Bigger straight. Big straight, not straight.
Oh, like Queen King.
That exists offsuit, 7, 8 doesn't. What's the difference there? Why do I make
Because there's more combos.
3 times as many, 3 times as many, 4 times as many if he's got all the king queen? If this player has all of the king queen and all of the 7, 8 suited, they have king queen 4 times as often than they have 7, 8.
Okay.
King queen's the last thing you've said there. So my critique is you're not thinking about straights enough. When straights are possible, we're in a spot where villain has an abundance of value combos. Like, they really are swimming in value combos. I'm folding this turn. There's no way I'm continuing here, because the straights are just too abundant. Queen 8 suited, 8, 7, king queen, all the stuff you mentioned as well, like the 2 pair in the sets. Yes, they can bluff with king X or queen X here, it's possible, but it's not going to be a super high frequency thing, and there aren't that many king X or queen X that aren't pairs or straights in these positions anyway. Clear turn fold. Definitely don't call here. The problem is the value region is just too vast.
Yeah, I've never thought about that actually. When there's more straights, that there's more combos because of the offsuit combos. Yeah,
straights are really easy to make. Like, see, when it's a 3 straight board, I don't want to like turn you into this like shivering wreck in the corner of the room that just sees straights everywhere, like wakes up in the middle of the night like sweating because of thoughts of straights. But like, yeah, straights are fucking easy to have, man. Straights are abundant things, you know?
Yeah.
Please fold. Countdown time. Jess really hopes she folds. I hope she folds. From 5, let's do this.
I don't think I do.
Yes, Jess. Yes. You're like, I'm not fucking posing. You're like, I'm not doing that fucking pose that you're doing, Pete. You're never going to get me to like pose for the celebration music.
I could have done a dab.
So super underbluffed spot. Too many value combos, too counterintuitive to bluff, not enough bluff combos.
One pair just isn't good enough here, for sure.
Well, no bluff catcher is good enough. Don't think about one pair. That's too absolutist. That's talking about absolute hand strength.
Not good either.
No bluff catcher is good enough. 10-9 is a fold.
Yeah.
Jack 10 is a fold. Jack 9 is a fold. Anything that's not a straight is probably a fold. A set might be a call because villain can have a worse set. So like Jacks is a call. 10s is a call. 9s is maybe a crying call. But like, see if you have like 10-9 here. Fold.
Yeah.
All right, Trace. Open it up, call a 3-bet, check, bet. You can raise here if you want, or you can call. Against fish, I would call, and I would bluff a lot of rivers, like a lot of turn and river runouts if it goes check, check. I'm just thinking like my hand is okay, but if it runs out like jack 10, I'll probably start bluffing, because then I won't be doing as well. And against the fish, the problem with raising is that they will sometimes jam on you with a random hand like ace king, and that will really suck. So against the fish, I would just play like this, and I think people that half pot here, probably fish, right? More of a fish sizing. Not saying it's bad, chat. Chat loves to come in and go, oh, what's wrong with half pot? GTO wizard uses half pot. Actually, it's like, I don't fucking care. I'm just saying that empirically, most of the people that do that will be fish. Okay, so pipe down, mate. Just calm it. Threes on the turn. We check, they check. You love to see it. Pick your value size. What do you want to make it?
Kind of like a third, maybe?
Seems really scared, kind of scaredy cat sizing. Like, they don't have a flush that often. Sometimes. I think you can go bigger. They have a lot of like one pair here. They have like some two pair. I think you can go bigger. I don't hate a third, but the problem is that a third is probably the kind of size that they're meant to raise quite aggressively. They might even be supposed to raise like top two against that or something, and they won't. So, or maybe bluff it sometimes. So I think in reality here, I'd go something larger, like 60-70% pot. You could check in theory, but I just don't think they're going to bluff enough here for it to be a good idea. So I'd value bet. Yeah, I don't really like this. I think that check is okay. Like this trappy line is okay in a spot where you think your opponent's going to bluff the river really frequently. But I think like for the same reason you were talking about earlier, this like 4 straight 3 flush, there's kind of like a lot of revulsion going on. Like people are quite appalled at this run out. I just don't think like King Queen of Hearts is gonna reignite itself very often here as a bluff. I don't hate this play though, in theory. And in theory, this is an absolutely fine play. I just think in reality against what I think is a fish, I just value bet. Oh wow. Oh dear. So this is what we call fortune reversal. It's one of the worst feelings in poker. Jess, define fortune reversal. What does that feel like? What does it mean?
Fortune reversal, so like we did just think our hand was like decent enough to check call, but now we're like not that big.
Well, yeah, we actually thought our hand was not just decent enough to check call, but like a hand we could bet big with, a hand that we were really happy to go for value with. I think you've been way too timid in this hand, actually. I think you've really overreacted to like the third diamond here. Okay. And I think this is probably a theme. But as played, yeah, Villain is now saying, I have a flush for value. So our hand has become
bluff catcher.
A bluff catcher. And that sucks. Like imagine going from a value bettable hand to a bluff catcher. So this is something we really have to process. We have to process this. It's important that we go, okay, I need to adapt to the fact that my hand is now a bluff catcher. I need to let go of the idea that my hand was a value beating hand. Now, Jess, I just recorded a video, Grade E, Lecture 1 of the Carrot Poker School, currently recording Grade E. If you're watching this after July, or in July 2023 or onwards, Grade E is available on carrotcorner.com. Check it out. If you're not, it's okay. You can warm up and get ready for Grade E with the normal Carrot Poker School, grades 1 through 3. You can do that. But anyway, I've just been recording a lecture all about how when fish overbet, it's very underbluffed on the river, and how when regs do it, in certain spots, it's actually much less underbluffed, and it can actually be really overbluffed. So this is an incredibly player-dependent thing. If I knew this was a good reg, I would call, because I think there's way too much like King 8 off with a King of Diamonds, like just way too many combos like this. If I thought this was a fish, I would fold, because I think this is extremely flush heavy. Now, I don't know if you remember the player type here just before I start analysing who I think it is.
No, because I think I do call here, and I can't remember the player type, but I do feel like it was like quite a reggy player, not a green tag fish.
Right, okay. So if it was a reg, I really don't mind calling at all. I think it'll be really easy for them to overbluff any of their King of Diamonds X combos, and I think they're going to bet their flush draws a bit too often on the turn if it's a reg here. So I really don't mind calling against a reg. And I think obviously your bluff catcher is great. You don't block any bluffs. You have a diamond to block ace 3 of diamonds. I think the issue is that I think there's a lot of value hands here for a start, blind versus blind, because a fish will 3-bet way more often with like ace 7 of diamonds. Like that hand's a call in GTO, but a fish will 3-bet that pre, right? So they'll just have way more nut flushes, and they'll probably have less King 7 off to start with. So this is so player dependent. Against the fish, this is a clear fold, and against the reg, I don't hate a call. But I do think it's a kind of miserable spot, and you definitely need to make sure that the player is quite good before you call here. Honestly, at 25 NL, come to think of it, I just think the regs are too bad for you to want to call here. I think you should just fold. But at higher stakes, I can see regs over bluffing. But I'm going to amend my statement, not because we lost, but because I just realized that the regs in this game at 25 rushing cash, I just don't think they're capable of finding enough bluffs here. And they just have a lot of value bets. They have a lot of value bets on this node. So I think you could have spent a bit more time in game, maybe just saying, I have a bluff catcher. And if you can just accept that, I think it's then easier to find a fold from there.
Okay.
Because maybe you're still thinking about the fact that you have a straight, but a straight doesn't matter. You may as well have top pair. I know you get that consciously, but subconsciously you have to acknowledge that you may as well just have top pair. In fact, it would be so much better to call with ace of diamonds jack or ace of diamonds queen than it would be to call with threes with a diamond, I would think. Because villain isn't bluffing with ace of diamonds here. They're bluffs of the king of diamonds or queen of diamonds.
Yeah.
Do remember to see bluff catchers as bluff catchers.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff we just went through. Let's decompress, let's summarize. That'll do it for today's episode of From Stalling to Mauling. Jess, what are you going to take away from this session? What does the next week or so hold for you?
Put more volume in for a start, get back into it. Do more streams as well. I've not really slacked off for that. The other thing would be to kind of remember when we're hand reading, like, don't just chuck out hands that, beat us, because we're wanting to focus on the ones that we beat. And also kind of on rivers, like that point about kind of, even though we've still got 20-30% equity when we show down, there are still spots where we can turn it into a bluff and take down the pot that way instead, when the board is so good for us. Like that board was just amazing for us. We had like loads of ace X, loads of sets, like it was just really good. So yeah, it was quite, when you look at it like that now, it's quite an obvious spot.
It's hard to say no to that much showdown value though, and to turn down the check branch. Like, it's a spewy looking line to bluff that river with jacks. I just think against humans it performs very well, but I wouldn't fault you for that. I would say the turn bet is a much bigger problem. And I think, like, whatever's going on in this hand, I don't like the way you're playing this river, to be honest. Like, if you're going to check, when we face this, we really have to see our hand as a bluff catcher. And then before we check, if you think you've got the equity to value bet, then value bet usually. Don't hope that people will bluff you unless they're more aggro players with really wide ranges or something. This is a spot I would just see betting is better than checking in, to be honest, just value betting.
Yes, I suppose in here, if we'd bet like, I don't know, we end up calling 50 BB if we bet like 20 something.
That's not actually the point. The point is just that you get to value bet by betting, and you get loads of money in against like kings with a diamond that calls but never bets, or ace X that calls but never bets, or two pair that calls but doesn't bet. You just get value. Like, when they jam, who cares? You're reverse engineering. You're going to like a bad conclusion and trying to like change reality. I don't care about that. All I care about here at this juncture is I can value bet, and I should value bet. That's it. Yeah, this is a separate thing. This is like this may as well be a different hand, right? Is that different?
Yeah, the forks haven't gone off yet.
Yeah, so maybe block bet or B50 or B60 or something is fine, but I think I like value betting. I guess it's a spot where, because the ace and the jack are not diamonds, the final thing I want to say on this is that they do actually have a hell of a lot of flushes. If those cards are diamonds and the lower cards are non-diamonds, they'll have way less flushes, right? So that's an important point as well. So maybe you're right, the block bet's better than a big sizing, or maybe we can go somewhere in between. But I think I would value bet.
Okay.
Cool. So that takes us to the end of today's episode. If you like the content, do check out carrotcorner.com for our paid content. I'll be back with Jess for another couple of episodes. And then, as I say, we'll be reopening the application process for the 3rd season of Coaching Journeys. We're also going to get Mark back on the show. We're going to find out how he's getting on. I miss Mark. I want to see how he's doing.
I am actually really looking forward to it. Like, I do want to see Mark.
Mark, the people's champion, of course, from season 1 of this Coaching Journeys show. All right, guys. See you next time.